AD Racers, we are here for another lineup of Tug of War 4. Today we have Team Harby going up against Team Plexadar. So let's start off real quick by breaking it down. We got 5 minutes before the first matchup. When we take the two different teams, Team Harby is coming to the table with the only A in the roster, 5 Bs, 0 Cs, 5 Ds, and 4 Xs.
Yeah.
Whereas Plexador has 0 A's, 0 B's, but they have 8 C's, 7 D's, and 0 X's. So they're definitely more padded in the middle with Plexadar, where Harby has a little bit on the top and some on the trailing end. So a bit different strategies going in there. And then when we break down, of course, the team rosters and we take just the times on average, Harby's team should be able to complete this course on average in 936 seconds in 825 milliseconds compared to Plexadar, which is 960 in 861. So Harby's team has a delta advantage of 24.036 seconds.
Yeah, that number is actually, it sounds like a lot. If you've watched any of the previous Tug of Wars, they're usually much closer. I think the most we had previous to this was like a handful of seconds. This is 24 seconds separating. Now, the interesting thing about it is that we have a lot of short races, not long distance races in this Tug of War. So the difference being that large seems like it would be very hard to overcome, but we're going to break down each of the races here as we go forward.
Absolutely. Now, the other thing too that's interesting about this is when we take just the win rates, there's a little bit of skewing going on because Team Harby has a few wild cards. There's a handful of players on his team or horses on his team that have only maybe a single digit, low double digit runs. Some of them have never won a race ever. So when we take the average win rates, Plex and Harby are basically the same, but Harby has a couple of these unknowns where it's hard to tell. But on the flip side, when we get into a couple of these other races, Harby also has the opposite, where horses that have very few races are pulling in 20, 30% almost win rates. So the question is will these really young, unperformant or unexperienced horses perform today?
Yeah, I mean, Harby's average horses in this event, their average number of races, so their experience is only 41 races. Now, if you strip out his two most experienced horses that will have hundreds of races each, you're talking about the average of the remaining 13 horses only being about 25 races each. In fact, we have one horse that has 0. So that's something fun that we're going to be paying attention to. The thing that I find interesting is that Plexadar averages like 275 races per horse. So we've got a real inexperienced versus experienced matchup today.
Yep, we do. Now, looking at the very first race that starts in about 100 seconds from now, we have an 8-furlong synth track. Now, the randomness of this generation, there is no dirt tracks today. There are 2 2-furlongs, 2 8-furlongs, the first and the last, and then there's a 6 right there in the middle. So what's unique about this one as opposed to some of the other events that we've had is that this one's all about the short distance. So if a team falls behind by 4 or 5 seconds, if any horse throws a donkey trot, especially in this first race, it's going to be extremely difficult to recover that because in those 2 furlongs, it's usually at the maximum a 2, maybe 3 second deficit, but it's going to be really hard to close that gap.
So let's talk about that race number 1. It's a synthetic 8 furlong. I know you've got Harby as the favored horse here, or set of horses in event 1. Is that true?
Yeah, the only reason why I say that is looking at lane 6 is going to be Commander. Commander is one of those horses that only has 7 runs, but it has a 28.57% podium rate. So it's one decent amount for its very, very few amount of runs. And then we got Dr. Nitzy, who's in, lane 5, another solid horse of Harby's. And then Retribution, or Justice Demands Retribution, is another novice, but it has 36 runs in it, averaging 11.11%. Whereas when you go down to Plexadar, none of them are above 11%, but they all have a lot more experience.
Yeah. Now, as we're getting ready for this race to run, I just wanted to point out that for every single race in this event today, Team Plexadar will always be in lanes 1, 2, and 3, and Harby Racing will be in 4, 5, and 6.
That was a surprising strong showing for Plexadar. Even though their main horse, Plexadar, ended it in last place, securing 1 and 2 definitely helps offset that. Justice Demands Retribution slipped back quite a bit as well. That number 6 horse that I was curious about was 7. That was his 8th run, pulling in a 3rd podium. Pretty decent. Now, how are we looking with the score-wise?
All right, here's a look at the Tug of War score after race 1. We've got Team Plexadar here with 53%, pulling just ahead by 1.76 seconds.
All right. So we 1.76. That's pretty decent. Okay, so as we enter into the next race, the 2 furlongs, it's going to be a little bit more challenging here. We got 2 minutes looking into this one. This is, again, where we have some more wild cards. On Team Harby in lane 4, we got Dorold, who is an X, has never ran this. So basically, it is not an X. It is just a complete unraced horse going into this. And then in lanes 5 and lane 6, we got Harby Love, a D. We got Desi Satan, an X. Now, Harby Love has 10.32% win rate with 155 runs. When we switch over to Plexadar, I would say that they are the stronger ones going into this race. You got in lane 1, one of my favorite horse names, Vegetarian. And then you followed by Berwiza Glass and Daciana. So you got 2 C's and a D against 2 X's and a D. And then when we take a look at some of the experience, Plexadar has 60 races, 42 races, and then 796. And what's most important about that is the 796 horse in lane 3, that's an 11.18% win rate. So I think going into this 2 furlong race, I would expect something good coming out of that lane 3 horse.
Yeah, now I have marked down that lane 3 seems like it would be the obvious favorite. Now that's due to a couple of things. It's a C rating, which is actually the best that we've got in this particular race so far. But it's also got the 796 runs with the 11% win rate that you mentioned. However, it also has the slowest pace for a 2 furlong synth out of all 6 horses. Now, lane 4, obviously, without having run, we don't know where it's going to end up. But it's got the slowest pace, and that to me is really interesting. Something that we're going to want to pay attention to here as we continue through the middle of these races, race 2, 3, and 4 are all really short distance. These are going to run quick, and that means the gap between them is not going to be all that significant, or it shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. So Plexadar having a 1.76 second lead right now is healthy when you consider the next 3 races are going to be so quick.
Yeah, I would agree entirely on this one. I'd be really curious to see. So lane 4 is going to be Harby's wild card option. So as we go into here, every single horse in the roster is 25 seconds. The fastest is 280 milliseconds, and the slowest is 376. So they are all quite identical. Oh, that's going to hurt Plex. That number 3, the Daciana, was his strongest horse with the 796, and to get last trailing by 1.5 seconds, Vegetarian 1.4 seconds. They lost 3 seconds off the top spot from that one. I'm going to take a guess that we're getting it pretty close to 0.
That you couldn't be more right. 11 1,000ths. That is insane. It's basically equal right now. We've got the ever slight advantage to Team Plexadar, barely hanging on to that lead.
All right. So let's see. So now we're going into the next race. This is going to be another 2 furlong race. So as you just pointed out, we have 11 milliseconds. So this thing is basically neck and neck. So going into this one, we're looking at this is the second Turf 2. In this one, Team Harby is showing up in lane 4, 5, and 6 again with Mouth Breather, a D, with 43 runs and only a 4.65% win rate. Then in lane 5, To the Freedom is the only A class in this entire event. This horse has only ran it 18 times, but it has done a win rate of a 22.22%. So the biggest question that I have going into this one is in that lane 5, is that 22%, was that all of the good runs out early? And then is it going to start running some skunky races following that one?
Yeah, this is, just another really good example of having inexperienced versus experienced horses. Harby's got the great largest number of races is lane 4 with 43.
Yeah, combined, Team Harby doesn't even have 100 races. So
yeah, so looking at Team Plexadar, we've got lane 1 and 2 having almost 500 between the two horses, both with double-digit win rates. That's the sort of thing that you want to see when you're going into a competition where you need more than just one horse to show up, right? These events, you can win them and still lose because you actually have that 5th, 6th place horse. That's not what you want. You want to be able to take the top 2 spots if you can, top 3 if you can. Definitely get that 1 and 2 spot if you can. That's the best way to maintain. And again, it being a 2 furlong race, I gotta say, I don't know. Averages say that Team Plexadar is going to win this, but win percentage says that it goes to Harby Racing.
So I'm going to put my money on this one on Plexadar. The only reasons why I'm thinking this way, and we got about 100 seconds before the next race, is when I take a look at that, is those first 2 horses in lane 1 and 2, as you point out, they have nearly 500 races between the 2 of them. They have some of the best average paces on the track. So they've obviously ran these things enough. When I take a look at Harby's team, especially in that lane 5, To the Freedom, that 22% win rate, I just have a hard time believing that that's going to be maintained. So if we're believing in cycles, I would just think that he has some bad runs in front of him. And if that pans out today, if right now, that's going to hurt him quite bad. Because on the averages, you got Plexadar has about a 300 millisecond lead collectively as a team. With only 11 milliseconds in between the 2, this, I think, has a good chance to swing it slightly favorable to Plexadar.
Yeah. If we're talking about RNG and just odds of winning something, it's incredibly fascinating. The lane 5 horse, To the Freedom, which is from Harby, averages 25.209 on this particular track. Yet in lane 3, we've got a horse that's only won 5% of the time, not 22% of the time, 5% of the time, with a faster average, 25.194. So again, it's all about being able to throw that variance, get a fast race, and consistently do it, even if occasionally you throw a bad race. You just got to hope that bad race isn't today.
Yeah, that's a good point. 34 runs with only a 5.88%. I'm assuming that this horse gets a lot of second and third, but hopefully for their sake, it ends up close to the front and does not fall behind. All right, we got to go in 7 seconds. That's quite the spread on that one. So just like we were concerned about for Harby, To the Freedom getting the last place of the 25.944, definitely going to lower down that win rate. That line 3, the Ventress, that horse also, both of the horses that we were looking at, they both underperformed, but it does seem to be pretty well spread, with Harby taking first and third, Plex taking second, but also closing the gap with fourth and fifth. I'm assuming again that this is going to be almost another wash. We were 11 milliseconds behind last time. How's it looking now?
Yeah, it all came down to the fact that Harby had that first and third place here. It offset that last place, and it barely moved the needle. This is what we're looking at right now. You've literally got less than half a second, but it has swung to Harby Racing here after the third race. So Team Plexadar is going to have to push hard to get back in this.
Oh, that's pretty impressive. Now going into the next two. So finally the 2 furlongs are out of the way. So now we have a little bit more distance so we can start to assess these horses. The next race starts in about 3 minutes. So looking at this next roster, this is a 6 furlong turf race. When we take a look at the total times, every horse here had, actually, again, we got one more wild card. The lane 4 horse, which is Don't Limit Me, that's ranked as a B, only has 17 runs of an experience, and it has never won a race. Now, when we take just the averages and ignore just the win percentages, Harby's team collectively is 221 seconds with 195 milliseconds to Plexadar's 220, 930. So Plexadar, again, has about a 200 thousandths of or millisecond advantage on this one.
Yeah, I think this comes down to looking at the lack of experience. And typically, I've been saying that presents a wild card where you just can't expect anything out of your horses. So you're just wondering what they're going to be able to do. But here, it actually kind of flips the script a bit, because the inexperience means that typically Team Plexadar would be expected to win this. But you never know what's going to happen. So you have to look at Team Harby and just say, or Harby Racing, say, okay, yeah, you've only got less than a 5% win rate between these 3 horses. That's going to change at some point, right? And the question is, does it change today? Does it change right now? And how many of those horses in lanes 4, 5, and 6 end up on the podium?
Yeah, that's a good point, because with Harby, we got 2 different horses. One of them has a 0% win rate. The second one, with 27 runs, has a 3.7% win rate. So both of those horses seem to be due to get a good run in there. So I would think that the probability that either lane 4 or lane 6 shows up in the winning spot is pretty high. When I take a look at the Plexadars, you got a lot of experience. In lane 2, Sexbomb has 828 runs. So they clearly know that this is a track that this horse likes, and it maintains an 11.84% win rate. So I would be surprised if this horse really falls back. I would expect it to be at least healthy in the front half of the pack. But then in lane 3, you got Borgia Brad, the D in the team, has only 33 runs with a 6% win rate. So again, going with those numbers, it's really hard to be as low as a 6% win rate unless this is just an absolute awful track for it. So I think that there's some good chances that it might show up as well.
Yep. And we've got a really interesting thing going on with lane 4, like you said, is Don't Limit Me, who has 0% win rate here. However, it has the fastest pace out of all 6 horses. So over a 6 furlong distance, it's going to be a matter of how much gap you can create if you are able to keep up that pace. If you only end up just barely ahead of the others, you can win and still barely add to your team's score.
Well, as we have about 18 seconds going into this one, I'm going to put my guess that lane 6, Laguigues, is going to have a surprise lineup here, because it is the slowest on average with only a 3% win rate. I think it's due.
I'm going with lane 1.
I got that prediction right. So Legwig's finally pulled off, got his first win, or not first win, but it's going to definitely help race at 3.7%. That lane 4 horse, Don't Limit Me, doesn't seem to like running this track very much. It is now on its 18th run, never has won a track, and that's going to definitely pull back its average pace.
That alone right there, having that lane 4 horse do as poorly as it did, resulted in Team Plexadar nearly retaking the lead. Harby's still got the lead just ever so slightly, but we are so neck and neck, 0.2 of a second separating these horses. Harby's got a 50.4% to his side.
0.21. Geez, that is close. This is one of the closest mount lineups we've had. Going into the next race, we have just under 3 minutes as we go there. This last and final race. So we're basically completely tied. The final race is back to the longer one. It is an 8 furlong and it's on turf. So looking at this one from Team Harby, we got a C, a B, and an X. Again, lanes 3, 4, and 5. Lanes 1, 2, and 3 are going to be Plexadar. And Plexadar has 2 Ds and a B on this one. So when you take the classifications, it's pretty much a wash. Those 2 Ds kind of compensate for a C and an X. So we're looking at almost another tie.
I mean, we knew that races 2, 3, and 4 were going to have really very little plus or minus, right, on this event. And we saw that. We swung a little bit to Harby, then we're swinging back toward Plex, but Harby's still holding it. Those were shorter distances. We end here on an 8 furlong. It's going to come down to which of these horses decides to just throw an absolute tank and slow down and end up 6th place, because that's what it's going to come down to here. And we've got in lane 2 a horse that's got 385 runs, but there's basically no other horse with experience. I mean, lane 5 has a little over 100, so each team technically has one experienced horse. But this is an absolute crapshoot.
Oh, it absolutely is. When we take the total teams, though, now looking at Harby's team, the average paces is 294 and 13. And then we got on the Plexadar 293.73. So again, Plexadar on this one has about 0.4 of a second faster, which is enough to overtake Harby, who has the 0.2 of a second head start on this one. But then going back to that wild card notion, it just paid off for Harby on that last race. On this one in lane 4, Thesis the X has the slowest pace of the entire lineup, has only 10 runs and has never won a race. So I would have to think, after running 10 races and putting up a terrible performance for those 10, I would think in lane 4, we're going to see that horse show up. Oh, I'm sorry, that's lane 5. Thesis, I think, is going to show up.
All right, while you go ahead and get that loaded up and ready for us, one thing that I wanted to mention is that with 8 furlongs and only 0.2 right here, it's going to come down to the pairing. Who gets 2 of them on the podium? That in my mind is what it's going to come down to. You could get 2nd and 3rd here and still pull off the win. You don't actually have to get 1st place.
It's going to be interesting. I do agree with you on that one. We've just also seen horses that have fallen back by 4 or 5 seconds, and if that happens, it's just a death sentence. That lead of Perfect Storm for the first couple furlongs was impressive. Sub 12 seconds with a naked horse I'm very impressed with that one. With having pulling off that 1 and 3, that's a solid lead. Without even doing the math, I got to assume that was enough for Plex to pull ahead.
Let's take a look. A full 7% swing to Team Plexadar, ends up winning by almost 3.5 full seconds. That I thought it was going to be even more than that, watching that one horse, Perfect Storm, way out in the lead there at one point. But even so, a great win by Team Plexadar.
Yeah, congratulations to you guys. All right, so now as we're going into this, we have now had officially 8 different teams that have competed in the Tug of War. There are still a few more teams of the Dirk Army that we'd like to try to pull back in. Shout out maybe to SMR, to the Average Jockeys. Who else do we think we could probably rope in for a week or two?
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a couple more
teams
teams out there.
We'll track down a couple more teams.
Yeah, hopefully we can get 1 or 2 more events before we start reshuffling it. We've been talking with a couple of the teams already that are ready for their second one. We're going to start having the round 2 where we can start establishing the true ranking brackets. But other than that, congrats to the Plexadar. Great comeback on that one with that start off with having a deficit of 20 seconds. A good showing to end up with 3.4 second lead.
Yeah, excellent day of racing, guys.
All right, take care. We'll see you guys soon.